If you're a coffee lover, then you already know the ritual. The smell, the warmth, the first sip that almost resets your brain. But here's the truth nobody likes to talk about. Not all coffee is created equal. In fact, some of the most popular brands you see every day on supermarket shelves are hiding things you'd never expect. Things that make your morning cup less energizing and a whole lot more questionable. And the surprising part is that many of these brands became famous decades ago, back when consumers didn't pay attention to sourcing, pesticides, mold contamination, or how stale the beans really were. Today, people assume popularity means quality, but when it comes to coffee, that's just not how it works. Think about it. Good coffee should be simple, clean beans, roasted fresh, stored properly, and free from contaminants. But mass-market brands aren't built on quality, they're built on volume. They roast beans in huge batches, store them for months, sometimes even a year before they reach the shelves, and often use lower-quality beans because it keeps costs down. When you buy a big jug or giant tin of ground coffee, you're not paying for freshness, you're paying for marketing. Meanwhile, the flavor suffers, the aroma disappears, and the health benefits, practically gone. Many people drink these coffees daily and don't even realize why their cup tastes bitter, burnt, or oddly flat. The reason is simple: the beans are stale. Coffee begins losing its flavor just minutes after it's ground. But supermarket brands grind and package it long before it ever gets to you, sealing it in airtight containers that preserve the caffeine but destroy the complexity. That's why so many people end up dumping in more sugar, more creamer, more syrups, trying to mask a flavor that shouldn't need hiding in the first place. But taste isn't the only issue. Some low-quality mass-produced coffees have tested positive for mold toxins, especially when the beans were poorly stored or transported through humid, unregulated environments. Most people don't think about this, but coffee beans are agricultural products. They're grown outdoors, exposed to weather, stored in huge sacks, and shipped across oceans. If a company doesn't prioritize inspection, humidity control, or proper drying, the risk of contamination rises fast. And the cheaper the brand, the less likely it is that every step was handled with care. Then there's the pesticide problem. Some of the largest commercial coffee farms use chemical treatments to protect yields and cut costs. But these chemicals can linger on the beans. When they're roasted, residues may remain. Organic farms avoid this, but mass-market brands rarely use organic beans. They rely on massive production and chemical support because it's cheaper and faster. That low price tag on your shelf often comes with a hidden cost: questionable farming practices. A lot of consumers also don't realize that big brands often blend multiple bean types, sometimes from several countries, so the taste remains consistent year after year. It sounds harmless, but here's the catch: blending allows companies to hide lower-grade beans inside the mix. Instead of a pure, carefully sourced coffee, you get a Frankenstein blend made from leftover batches that weren't good enough to be sold on their own. Consistency is important, but not when it's created by lowering the bar. This is why so many experts warn against certain mainstream brands. It's not that every bag is dangerous, it's that the standards vary, the sourcing is unclear, and the quality control is inconsistent. You deserve a cup you can trust every morning, not one that leaves you guessing what might be inside. But here's the good news: once you know what to look for, avoiding low-quality brands becomes easy. Freshness is the first sign. If a brand doesn't provide a roast date and only shows an expiration date, that's a red flag. Good coffee companies proudly print the roast date because they want you to drink it at its best. Big brands don't like roast dates because their coffee sits in warehouses, trucks, and store shelves for months. They don't want you to know how old it really is. Another big indicator is the grind. Whole beans always beat pre-ground coffee, because grinding speeds up oxidation. If a brand only sells ground coffee, you already know freshness isn't their priority. Whole beans lock in flavor, aroma, antioxidants, and that naturally sweet espresso-like richness you can't get from pre-ground. And once you grind it yourself, you'll immediately notice the difference. Beyond freshness, think about transparency. Companies that care about quality tell you where their beans came from, when they were harvested, and how they were processed. Low-end brands with weak sourcing don't offer that information because they can't guarantee it themselves. When a brand says, 100% Arabica, that might sound premium, but it tells you almost nothing. It doesn't explain whether the beans were pesticide-free, mold-free, ethically sourced, specialty grade, or roasted recently. Those are the things that matter. So when experts say to avoid certain coffee brands, they're not being dramatic. They've tested, tasted, inspected, and compared. They know which brands cut corners, which ones store coffee longer than they should, and which ones rely on cost-cutting tricks. They know which coffees leave consumers with jitters instead of clean energy, and which ones taste burnt, because the beans actually are burnt, roasted to hide imperfections. People think bitterness is just part of coffee, but real bitterness comes from poor quality or stale grounds, not from premium roasting. A naturally well-grown coffee bean has sweetness, smooth acidity, aroma, and depth. It shouldn't taste like charcoal, chemicals, or cardboard. When a brand masks bad flavor with dark roasting, it might fool beginners, but anyone who has tasted fresh beans knows the difference instantly. And here's something else people rarely think about: storage. Good coffee brands use high-barrier bags with one-way valves that let carbon dioxide escape but prevent oxygen from entering. This protects flavor and keeps the beans fresh. Cheap brands use tins or plastic containers that don't offer the same protection, leading to faster oxidation and a duller, flatter taste. Once oxygen gets in, the coffee starts dying. It might still have caffeine, but the soul of the coffee disappears. That's why the shift towards smaller specialty brands has become so huge in the U.S. People want better quality, better sourcing, cleaner beans, and a better coffee experience overall. They're tired of drinking the same corporate blends that feel more like a habit than something enjoyable. And once you try a high-quality brand for the first time, it's almost impossible to go back to the stale, mass-produced stuff. Most people don't realize how deeply coffee quality shapes their energy, their mood, and even their long-term health. When you drink coffee loaded with mold, toxins, or stale oils, your body spends the whole day fighting what you just consumed instead of using that energy to power your mind. But when you drink clean, freshly sourced coffee, you feel it instantly. Your brain sharpens, your focus deepens, and your bloodstream isn't overloaded with hidden contaminants pretending to be a morning boost. That's why switching from low-quality brands to cleaner options is one of the simplest upgrades you can make. It's not about becoming a coffee snob, it's about understanding what your body deserves. People spend hours researching diets, supplements, and biohacks, yet they drink the same cheap coffee every morning without realizing how much damage it does silently and consistently. There's also a psychological trap. Big brands rely on familiarity. If you grew up smelling a particular brand in your kitchen or saw it in your grandparents' house, you might assume it's safe. But nostalgia doesn't equal quality. Today's market is designed around cost reduction, bigger farms, cheaper labor, faster roasting, and longer shelf life. All these shortcuts create coffee that looks normal but carries pollutants that your body quickly absorbs. When you replace that with clean, freshly roasted beans from trusted sources, the contrast is shocking. Your stomach feels lighter. Your jitters disappear. The afternoon crash fades. What you're left with is pure, clean energy, the way coffee was meant to be enjoyed. A lot of people also never learn how to store their beans correctly. Even the best coffee loses its soul when exposed to air, light, or moisture. If you leave a bag open, oxygen floods in and destroys the natural oils that give coffee flavor and aroma. Moisture encourages mold, especially in darker roasts. And sunlight heats the beans, altering the chemical structure that determines their balance and sweetness. The difference between a great cup and a terrible one sometimes isn't the brand, it's the storage. That's why airtight, opaque containers matter. Not fancy, not expensive, just smart. Another factor is grind size. Many people grind their coffee too fine for drip brewers, which extracts the beans and causes bitterness that hides the natural sweetness. Espresso grinds used for pour-over make the same mistake in reverse, drowning the flavor. When you match the grind to your brewing method, the coffee opens up. Flavors you never tasted before suddenly appear: chocolate notes, citrus hints, nutty undertones. A lot of people think premium coffee tastes strong, but strong isn't the goal. Balanced is, clean is, fresh is. The brewing temperature matters too. Boiling water kills flavor compounds and burns the grounds. Water that's too cool barely extracts anything, leaving the coffee flat and sour. The perfect range, 195°F to 215°F, is where magic happens. It's the zone where acids, oils, and aromatics dissolve in harmony, producing a cup that feels smooth instead of sharp, vibrant instead of harsh. Good beans deserve good brewing. Some people assume that buying clean coffee means paying luxury prices, but that's not true. Most high-quality small roast brands cost the same or even less than supermarket coffee when you compare servings. You're not paying for corporate marketing or giant distribution chains. You're paying for beans grown in healthier soil, roasted in smaller batches, and shipped fresher. And because pure coffee isn't packed with toxins, it often reduces cravings, headaches, and fatigue throughout the day. In a way, clean coffee pays you back. Once you switch to better coffee, you also discover how unnecessary sugar and flavored creamers become. When coffee is fresh and high quality, it already tastes sweet, smooth, and bright. You don't need to drown it in additives to make it drinkable. That's when you realize cheap coffee was never a preference. It was a dependency built on masking bad taste. Clean coffee lets you actually taste the bean, not the chemicals hiding behind it. If you truly want to upgrade your daily routine, start experimenting. Try light roasts if you want a brighter, fruitier experience. Try medium roasts for a balanced, versatile cup. Go for dark roasts only if you enjoy earthy, smoky notes, but make sure they come from brands that roast without scorching. Your taste preferences aren't fixed, they evolve with exposure to better quality. Most people who switch from burnt brands suddenly discover flavors they never imagined existed in coffee. And remember, freshness has a clock. Beans peak about a week after roasting and hold their best flavor for roughly a month. Anything older slowly becomes flat, dull, or bitter. That's why small batch roasters often stamp the roast date directly on the bag. They're proud of how fresh their product is. Big brands hide behind Best Buy labels because they don't want you to know how old the beans really are. If you want the ultimate freshness test, use the bloom method. Pour a small amount of hot water on your grounds and watch what happens. Fresh coffee bubbles and expands because it's releasing coal that was naturally trapped during roasting. Stale coffee sits still like wet sand. This simple test tells you more about coffee quality than any marketing claim on a package. At the end of the day, upgrading your coffee isn't just about taste, it's a lifestyle shift. It's about choosing energy that feels real instead of forced. It's about reducing what harms you and increasing what fuels you. It's about respecting your mornings, protecting your health, and treating your daily ritual with intention. When you pour that first cup of clean, freshly brewed coffee, you're not just drinking something warm, you're choosing how you want the rest of your day to feel. And once you experience that difference, you don't go back. You don't settle for toxic brands, dusty beans, or bitter chemically tasting brews. You choose quality on purpose, you choose clarity, calm energy, and flavor that makes waking up feel worthwhile. You choose coffee the way it was meant to be, pure, honest, and alive.